In the meantime, we want to bring into the conversation our friend legal analyst Neama Rahmani. We've been relying on him so extensively to help us make sense of what's somewhat complex, arcane, a lot of these legal rules in place at the outset of such a high-profile trial, and Neama joins me. Neama, thanks for being with us here. Obviously, we've discussed this before. This is the first criminal trial of Donald Trump's, or case, I should say, to go to trial. I sound like a broken record there, but before we get into kind of the legal nitty-gritty, that is why this is so significant and so important. If you could just touch on that aspect here. This hasn't happened before.
Well, it's really a historic day for legal nerds like myself and constitutional scholars. I mean, we've never had a former president have to stand trial in a criminal case. Obviously, there have been various civil proceedings, but there hasn't been anything like this. So we started jury selection, the motions to dismiss and change the venue were denied. So it's all happening. And it'll take about a week or so to maybe pick 12, hopefully impartial jurors to hear this case. But it's going to be one of the most fascinating and politicized trials in American history.
So let's talk about jury selection, because from what is being reported and from what we're being told is it's going to be a very lengthy, laborious process. I think some 96 jurors or potential jurors were brought in today. Each juror has to answer 42 questions aloud in this kind of juror questionnaire in front of the entire court. And then the judge asks the jurors row by row if they cannot be fair and impartial to let him know now. So Judge Juan Merchan wants to weed out these potential jurors, or I guess non-jurors, so to speak, early and quick, right?
Well, exactly. And he doesn't want to waste anyone's time. And let's be honest, people do not want to serve as jurors. People get that summons in the mail and jury duty. They don't want to do it. But in a case like this, where everyone has a preconceived notion about Donald Trump, some people think he's a criminal, an insurrectionist. Others think he's an American hero standing up to a system that's trying to railroad him. So it's not like people haven't heard of him and they don't have those preconceived notions. And there's some people that don't want to serve as jurors because they don't want to deal with the criticism or the attacks by Trump's base. So Juan Merchan, the judge, is giving everyone essentially a free pass. You say you don't want to be here, I'm letting you go. Save everyone's time.
Kind of like a speak now or forever hold your peace type thing, Judge Juan Merchan there. Let's talk about the judge, Neama. The Trump legal team kind of put out all the stops to file this recusal motion for the judge. The judge, Juan Merchan himself, denied the Trump legal team's recusal request here. Do you think that opens up any problems? Say this gets to the appellate level. Say Trump gets convicted and he wants to appeal. Do you think the very fact that Merchan didn't recuse himself opens up the possibility at the appellate level of some of these, chinks in the armor, so to speak, that might jeopardize the prosecution at the appellate level, Neama?
I don't think so. It's not a very good appellate issue, and this is why. Obviously, there's been a lot of criticism of the judge's daughter and her ties to the Democratic Party. But frankly, it really doesn't matter under the law. A judge's family member can be political or partial, and it doesn't require recusal. Look no further than Justice Clarence Thomas. A lot of folks have been really critical of his wife, Ginny, and some of the active positions she's taken on social media, even involving matters going before the high court. And it's not a reason to get Justice Thomas off the case. So the law is pretty clear. Unless the judge himself or herself is biased or there's that appearance of impropriety, they can stay on.
Okay, so you're not envisioning problems on that front if and when it might get to the appellate level. The Trump legal team is not going to have that arrow in their legal quiver, so to speak.
I don't think so. Obviously, if you're the defense here, you're going to raise every possible argument, right? Recusal, bias, change of venue, trying to get it delayed. These are all procedural tactics that may benefit Trump because we know, obviously, he's going to appeal everything. And the further he pushes this case out, if he can get it past the November election, well, that's to his benefit because if he wins, all his legal problems going away. But this was the first case to be filed. Frankly, it's a lot more simple than the other cases. There's no executive or presidential immunity argument because this all happened before he was president. So the Supreme Court decision in that case won't affect the New York state case like it may the others. So Trump's going to raise these defenses. I just don't think they're going to work in this particular case.
All right, I think it's important, just a few more of these logistics, so to speak, about how the trial is going to run. According to our producers who were in the courtroom, the attorneys estimate the trial will last approximately 6 weeks. The judge acknowledges that he is unsure how long jury deliberations will take. The trial will not convene on Wednesdays or on Monday, April the 29th. The judge assures the jurors that if they observe the Passover holiday, they do not have to choose between jury duty and observing. There's been a lot of talk and back and forth about the timeline here and what Trump's attendance is going to have to be during the duration of this. What is it going to be? Is he going to have to be there every single day that the proceedings are happening?
Donald Trump is like any other criminal defendant. He will have to be there every day unless the judge excuses him. And I know the former president has asked to be excused for his son's graduation, and the Supreme Court oral argument in that presidential immunity case, and the judge has said no. Now, it's not uncommon for judges to be dark one day to handle other matters because they still have their normal calendar when the trial is proceeding. Oftentimes, judges will do that on a Friday, and there's been some criticism. Obviously, there's a lot of Orthodox Jewish potential jurors there in New York, but during daylight savings, I believe that the proceedings will be wrapped up before Shabbat on Fridays. And of course, we talked about Passover and any other holidays. Judges tend to make accommodations for any religious holidays on the part of the potential jurors. But, I wouldn't be surprised if this case drags on for months. I think the cross-examination of Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, and I expect Donald Trump himself to testify, those will last days.
Yeah, I mean, some of the names that I think a lot of our viewers will know were brought up today in the public setting. Names like Steve Bannon, Michael Cohen, Kellyanne Conway, Stormy Daniels, Rudy Giuliani, Hope Hicks, Jared Kushner, Karen McDougal, Reince Priebus, and then, of course, the former president's children, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, and his wife, Melania Trump. And you just have to imagine, how, I don't know, it would be awkward and uncomfortable if, this is about a perceived extramarital affair and hush money payments to the alleged mistress in it, and your family is sitting in the courtroom, or at least hearing the testimony here. Jurors are going to have a lot on their plate. And the jury selection is going to be so lengthy. I mean, how difficult is it going to be to find a jury that's impartial?
It's going to be very difficult, Andrew. I expect the judge should go through hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 jurors by the time it's all said and done to get 12 jurors and alternates. Because, again, everyone's heard about this case. They have a preconceived judgment about Donald Trump and whether he's guilty or not. And new jurors are going to set all that aside and decide the case solely on the facts and evidence in this case. And there's multiple issues, right? Did the affair happen? Was the hush money payment made? And really, what was it for? Was it in furtherance of or to cover up another crime? This is the prosecution's theory, right? That it's tax-related or a campaign finance violation. Or was it basically to prevent embarrassment on the part of Donald Trump and his family? And if so, like has been discussed, that's just a misdemeanor, a slap on the wrist under New York law.
Yeah, I want to talk about that as well. Not only how the jurors have their work cut out for them whenever they get chosen and whoever they are, but also Alvin Bragg in bringing this case. We had been asking some of our legal analysts and friends last week, previewing today, whether or not you need that first. Do prosecutors need to prove an affair happened as a predicate to get underway with the rest of it, or no? Can you start at that point already and then move on from there?
I don't think from a legal and factual perspective they need to prove the affair happened, because the business expense was logged as a legal expense, and it really wasn't a legal expense, right? I think that's a challenge the defense is going to have. And not to say this is the most serious case in the world, but really if you're just looking at, was this a false business record? Was this improperly illegal payment to Michael Cohen. Well, if you believe Michael Cohen and there was no retainer, there was no legal services rendered, then it's a false business record whether the affair happened or not. Now, a lot of folks don't believe Michael Cohen is a convicted felon and he's admitted a liar, and that's a separate situation altogether. But I think the prosecution does have a path to victory without proving that the affair actually happened.
You know, Neama, I want to also talk about this. We're so thankful to have you because you're answering these questions so well. Let's bring up another element of this, the gag order. Many that we have spoken to here have described it, as quite wide-ranging and extensive on, the speech of former President Donald Trump. What do you say to some of Trump's supporters who think that his First Amendment rights are being prohibited and infringed upon? Of course, you heard Trump say that time and time again, that the judge is controlling what he can and cannot say. Is that true? Is the First Amendment argument from the Trump side in good faith or bad faith when it comes to a gag order?
Well, it's a viable argument. I understand what the former president is saying, especially in the middle of a campaign year. So it has to be balanced, right, against the parties to the case, the witnesses. Can't intimidate witnesses. Doesn't matter what the First Amendment says. So, I think there's a reason that all the judges that have imposed gag orders on Donald Trump, they really haven't enforced them, right? Even Judge Engoron in the civil fraud case, he issued pretty nominal fines of $5,000 and $10,000. No one's held Trump in contempt. Even today, the prosecution was asking for fines of $1,000 each for each violation. That's nothing to someone like Donald Trump. So the gag order, although it's gotten a lot of play in the press and everything, and Trump has pushed the limit, it's been toothless, in my opinion, as an attorney who, really, if the gag order was to really be imposed and Judge Merchan thought that Trump violated it, it would have held him in contempt by now.
Okay, so I believe, though, that Judge Merchan does think he violated it. There's going to be hearings and arguments on possible sanctions over that gag order violation Wednesday, April the 24th, so next Wednesday. So it seems like the judge thinks there have been violations of the gag order, but to your point, what does the judge do about those violations to the gag order? We've seen some fines. Maybe he's going to get a fine next week when these arguments take place. So the DA's office argues for the admission of various social media posts saying that Trump has violated the gag order by attacking witnesses like Michael Cohen. I just want to correct myself there. DA Bragg's office believes there's been violations of the gag order, not necessarily the judge in the case. I think that's an interesting and crucial kind of distinction to make. The judge doesn't kind of lead from behind on that, does he?
No, but my point generally is this, and any lawyer or any party in any case in this country would have been treated very differently. If the judge believed that a party or a witness or an attorney was intentionally violating an order over and over again, they would have been held in contempt. Now, I think judges are hesitant to take a very unprecedented step of holding a former president in contempt. It may result in massive civil unrest. There's the First Amendment issues that we've talked about as well. So maybe there's a viable defense here. My point, generally speaking, is this is not a typical case, and this gag order isn't being treated the same as it would be in any other case in this country.
Okay, so Neama, is that special treatment? Is because he's such a high-profile defendant, is he getting special treatment about the gag order? Is the gag order merely symbolic? Because if there's been fines in other cases, he hasn't been held in contempt over some of these, what the prosecution is alleging are gag order violations. His team of attorneys says each tweet and each post on Truth Social needs to be looked at individually, and that Trump has a right to defend himself. I mean, you have such a high-profile defendant who's also the presumptive nominee of one of the two major American political parties in a presidential election year, with a gag order on him in a trial. So, like I said, and we use the word unprecedented so many times, you have all of that in the mix.
You do, and that's why the typical rules don't apply in this case. Obviously, you have a presidential candidate. You have these very real First Amendment issues. You have the practical reality, Andrew, that most people, when they're on trial, they don't criticize the judge in the case that may rule against them and may sentence them. But Trump obviously does not care about all that. He's not your typical defendant. He has no problem attacking the judge and the litigants in the case. So the normal rules don't apply, and that's why we're really in uncharted legal waters here. But I just don't think the gag order has a lot of teeth, and most of the judges have overseen Trump's trial. They've been all bark and no bite.
All right, Neama, we're going to have to leave it at that. What are you watching for tomorrow, the next day? Okay, it doesn't meet on Wednesdays, but are we just going to be in jury selection for the next 3 weeks, you think?
I think we'll hopefully get a jury next week. I would be shocked if we get it done this week, but hopefully by the end of next week, we can get 12 men and women in panels and a few alternates and get started.
All right. Neama Rahmani, as always, thanks so much. Talk soon.